You're listening to On the Way Home with your host, Emmy Kelly.
Hi to all our amazing On the Way Home listeners. I'm Emmy Kelly from Blue Door, and I'm here today to host a conversation with Michael Quast, who is the CEO of Passive House Canada. Before we get into that, a little bit about what's happening at Blue Door. Our team is really excited to be putting on the final pieces of our new strategic plan that's going to launch in 2026. So stay tuned for exciting news. Today, we will continue the conversation and learn lots from Michael about the opportunities for climate conscious housing. Let's get started. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. Here on the way home, we start each episode off with asking our guests our favorite signature question. What does home mean to you?
Oh, gosh. Home means a place where you can be yourself and you can be safe and you can invite friends and family over and live your best life and experience your best dreams.
That's awesome. Maybe to start us off, we'd love for the audience to hear from you, what your background is, what's the path that brought you here, and just share a little bit more about you.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm grateful to be here, and I love the work that Blue Door is doing, and you as well now. So my career has been a long, windy, curvy path, and I've loved every moment of it. But I did not start at the age of 4 deciding that I wanted to be a carpenter or a bricklayer or a doctor or a lawyer. And in some regards, I still wake up every morning wondering what it is that I will do. And then I realize that I'm enjoying what I am doing right now. So I started, in school. I got a master's degree in political theory. I thought I was going to be a professor. Then I thought I might be a lawyer. Then I got into television for about 25 years or so. And then throughout it, the constant thread has always been construction of some sort. My father was a bricklayer by trade and a civil engineer by profession. And growing up, I was building stuff with him all the time, and loved doing that. Loved working with my hands, loved creating things. And I actually was renovating houses with him as a teenager. And along the path of television, I bumped back into construction, and we can get into that a little later on. But discovered that I loved that world of connecting television and construction together, and really telling stories and helping people to improve the home where they can live their best life. And then I also discovered that there's a lot of value in manufacturing and product supply and services. So I've been around manufacturing. I've been around service delivery for the architecture, engineering, construction space. And also in the not-for-profit space. I sat on the board of directors for Habitat for Humanity in Halton, Mississauga. And now I'm here living, a unicorn opportunity to connect my professional life with my personal passion.
That's awesome. So I heard something about you building Oakville's first straw bale home.
Yes.
And now you're leading Passive House Canada. What drew you to sustainability and construction, and how has that shaped your path? Yeah,
so going back to my father building different projects. My dad was a character. My dad lived on 100 acres in the middle of nowhere, and you had to walk for an hour through the bush, cross a swamp, if you wanted to see him. So you had to be really motivated to go to see him. And he did some amazing stuff. He lived on land with mostly weed trees and poplar trees, and he built houses. He had 3 houses there. He had a barn. He had livestock. And you would walk around and you go, he built this all by himself. And I would take, vacation and go up there and help build with him. And really grew to appreciate his passion for connecting the built environment with the natural environment, and understanding and appreciating nature, and recognizing that, whatever footprint people and human beings have on the earth can last if you don't do it right. And if you do it right, then it doesn't really leave too much of a scar on the earth. So that was sort of in the back of my head. My wife and I, we first moved into what was a cottage, built as a cottage in the 1900s. It had no insulation, and when the wind blew, you knew it was cold outside or it was hot outside. The point is, you knew exactly what it was, and there was nothing you could do about it. And it used to drive me crazy. My wife loved that house, and I grew to hate the house because it was just so poorly insulated. And I remember we would have numerous conversations about, if we were ever fortunate enough, and you have to be pretty fortunate in this world to be able to have the opportunity to build your own home. But I said, if that ever happens, I want to build a super insulated house. I want to build the most insulated home that you can possibly imagine. And we also had a passion for the Southwest, that sort of architecture, that adobe style. And then one day I heard about the straw bale workshop up north, given by a gentleman by the name of Chris Magwood. And I went up there and I learned about straw bale construction, and I fell in love. I loved, again, that sense that you were working with nature to build something. That was really important to me. And it was a long journey. I'll spare you all the details, but convincing code officials and insurers and lenders and other tradespeople that it was not crazy, and that the little pigs were going to be fine, and the wolf wasn't going to blow the house down. Had lots of those conversations. So it took about 3.5 years from start to finish, where we built this house, and we're still living in it. Raised our kids in here, and it's super insulated. The walls are like 18 inches thick. And when the wind blows outside, I do not know that the wind is blowing unless I look at the trees. So it's not a passive house, I should stress that, but it is absolutely environmentally and sustainable in that regard. And that, for me, is super important. And now that I'm, with Passive House Canada, it feels like, I've put my money where my mouth was, but now I get to keep talking about it, but also talk about a standard that is, I guess, higher and more significant and more impactful to the environment and how humans interact with nature.
It's a lot of personal passion there.
Yeah.
Passive House Canada is playing a major role in transforming how we build across the country. So for those unfamiliar, how would you describe the mission of Passive House Canada, and what sets it apart from other green building initiatives?
Yeah, so Passive House is a standard that was started in Europe, Germany, in the 90s. It is a model. There are many standards, as you've identified, that are talking about building a better performing building, lead among them, net zero. Passive House is based in science. That is its root. And so the performance of the building needs to be measured, and the operating costs as a result, the impact to the environment in terms of lower heating costs and lower energy use to heat and cool the house is tremendous. Like it's noticeable. In terms of the standard, it has at its root sort of 5 principles. One is you've got a super insulated house. The other one is that you've got no thermal bridging. You've got great windows. You've got an HRV to make sure that there's good air circulation inside for the occupants. And there's a 5th one that's just escaping me at the moment. What have I missed? Airtightness, possibly the most important, making sure that the building envelope is airtight. And so part of the experience of building a passive house often is doing a blower door test to make sure that the that the structure is in fact airtight and you're not losing heat or cooling that you've spent so much money to deliver to the house. So Passive House works both on single family homes, but it also works on towers. So it works on multifamily residential buildings. It can work on commercial towers. It can work on industrial, basically any kind of building that we can imagine. We can build to this higher standard, built and rooted in science. And that part's really important. So, if you're asking me, Passive House is sort of at the top of the apex. There are lots of other standards. I celebrate those standards personally. I think it's fantastic. We should all be talking about building a better envelope. But if you want to build the best envelope, let's have a conversation about Passive House.
And that, my friends, is why Michael is the CEO of Passive House. No, but you're right. I have heard that Passive House standard is often described as one of the most rigorous for energy efficiency. So could you tell us a little more of how it differs from the conventional building practices, and why is it such a game changer for climate conscious construction?
Yeah, I mean, there's this perception that Passive House is also more expensive to build. And there are certainly lots of instances where it, in fact, was more expensive to build, but it doesn't have to be that case. And often it requires a good conversation with the different players and principles that are involved in construction. So engineers talking really effectively with architects and designers and consultants, energy consultants, but also engaging general contractors and making sure that they're at the very beginning of the process, involved at the very beginning of the process. How does it differ? Well, we all have a different experience, I think, with minimum code to some extent, whether we own or we rent. And minimum code, when I was with the Homes Group, used to say minimum code gets you right to the edge of the cliff. And you hope nothing happens, like a heavy wind or lots of rain, like what happened in Texas recently, or lots of heat, which happened this past weekend, in the Toronto area. And minimum code is good when you don't have anomalies like that, or spikes or massive sine waving happening in terms of the environment and the massive temperature swings that we have. Minimum code is not good at handling that stuff. And so more and more people are recognizing when they're in their homes that, you get frost on the windows sometimes, or lots of condensation on the windows, or it's warm or cool in one part of the house and not in the other, or the apartment air in this room feels fresher than in that room, or these windows are more effective than those windows. And so, whether you rent or you own and you live in a space, you are probably engaging with the code or the standard that was used in that building. And Passive House standard allows you to actually, in my view, to live in a space where the temperature is the same in all the rooms. It's not fluctuating wildly. The air quality in all the rooms is good for you. The energy costs to heat or cool that space are going to be substantially lower than a conventionally built home or building, which has, and we can talk maybe about this as well, but that has a huge impact on energy poverty conversations where, people who may be struggling to pay rent or a mortgage are also struggling to heat and cool that place. And that becomes even more concerning as temperatures become more erratic, and we have hotter temperatures in the summer and cooler temperatures, in the winter. And so suddenly we're spending more money, on that part of, the having a roof over our head equation. So how does it differ? Well, it differs on whatever standards you happen to be living in. If it's minimum code, then it differs pretty much in every respect that there is. And if you live in a higher standard home, a LEED home, then there are lots of similarities, but there are also some marked differences.
Out of interest, can you apply Passive House Canada on like an older home?
You can do a retrofit on an older home. You can do a retrofit on any building that meets the Passive House standard. You just make sure that you've got the right design team working with you, and that you understand what the design intent is. Usually it means replacing the windows and making sure that the house is airtight. So you need to look at the building envelope and, whatever cladding is on the house that might need to come off. Well, it probably has to come off. But absolutely, you can retrofit buildings to that standard, or you can build new to the standard.
So you've worked closely with builders, engineers, regulators. What are some of the common challenges in getting wider adoption of Passive House standards? And how are you at Passive House Canada helping to overcome those challenges?
Well, the answer to the latter question, Emmy, is one conversation at a time. So like this,
Okay.
having those conversations with people. I'm a firm believer that change needs to happen from the ground up. It can happen, you can push it down as well, but you have to pull it up. And part of that is making people aware. And I remember, in the television days when I was working with the Holmes Group, and we would come in and rescue homeowners from unscrupulous contractors who had done something that was horrible to, their home and ultimately to their lives and their pocketbook. We would have conversations about, how the house worked. A lot of people, I'm going to get on a soapbox for a second, but a lot of people, when they buy a house, they look at the cosmetics. They think about the granite countertop and the crown molding. They don't really think about, what's the insulation, what's behind the walls, how does the house get heated or cooled in the different seasons. Those things only come to mind when it's, pouring rain outside and the water's coming in somewhere, and you've got 3 or 4 inches, maybe even more, of water sitting in your basement. Then you start thinking about what's behind the walls or how's the house constructed. And if we can have those conversations more frequently, so that consumers understand what it is that they're buying or they're renting, and they start making those choices more in an informed way, then they start helping builders to start designing to a higher standard, because ultimately builders are challenged. Construction is a hard space to be in. I mean, construction is high risk and low margins. Like it's hard to make money in the construction space. And most of the builders that I've had the good fortune of meeting are really genuinely motivated about, and they're very proud of the work that they do, whether they're doing multifamily, high-rise buildings, or a single-family home. They take immense pride in what they do, even the tradespeople working on the project. But ultimately, what they're doing is they're building something that other people will buy or invest or operate. And so there's a market equation there. And if those people are not really motivated or interested in, a higher standard or, better performing envelope, then that doesn't get the priority. The priority becomes the granite countertop or the crown molding. And so I think the conversations need to be so broad and so loud in some instances that you need to engage people who might not seem as the obvious targets. Because when you start drawing them into the conversation, you start drawing in politicians. You start drawing in the contractors and the general contractors and the builders. You start drawing in the tradespeople. You start drawing in the manufacturers and the suppliers who, the contractors need to rely on for the product. You start drawing in the architects and the engineers. You start pulling those people in together. Sometimes it's really easy to get an architect and an engineer really excited about building to a higher standard. Then you need to figure out who's going to pay for it. And if you can get the consumer at the other end to say, this is what I want, if you can start creating that demand or that awareness, then you can pull up and then you can continue to push down.
Wow, it's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
You mentioned the home shows. You were deeply involved, as I understand it, in brand building with the Holmes Group and Mike Holmes' Make It Right initiative. Maybe share with us a little bit about what you learned about trust, storytelling, public engagement that you're now applying to your work at Passive House Canada, and as you're like coming into the housing space. What would you share with us there?
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yeah, nothing earth-shattering. Sorry, I don't have any eureka moments here, but I will say that storytelling is important, but it needs to be authentic and it needs to be rooted in something real. And so you need to genuinely want to solve problems when you're telling a story, I think, in terms of connecting with consumers. And so, that's a philosophy that I learned when I was at the Homes Group, recognizing that there are often different paths to the same outcome or the same objective, but you need to be very mindful that you are consistent in the way that you're talking about the problems, and that you're looking for solutions and you're offering those solutions, and that you are transparent in the way that you're approaching it. That's easy to say in some respects. The old adage is that it can take years, generations to build a reputation and seconds to lose it, and that's absolutely true. Like, you need to be very purposeful in the way that you connect with people, but also very mindful and as I said, authentic. And when you make an exception, when you go, oh, well, this one time we'll do it this way, that could be the one time that just destroys years, decades of effort to be consistent and authentic. I see when, I've only been here at Passive House Canada in this role for about 11 weeks at this point. But I see an amazing community of really smart people who are genuinely focused on trying to build to a higher standard, not for their own purposes, but for the people who live in those buildings, who will occupy that space, and ultimately to make an impact on the environment. I mean, that's really where this standard comes from. The idea is to reduce, the footprint, going back to the thing that I learned about my dad, or learned from my father rather. We need to make sure that we're connecting what we build in the built environment and understand its impact on the planet. And there are lots of people who've been talking about that in different ways, in different spaces. But in the building space, again, there are different standards. The Passive House standard, in my mind, is at the top of that apex about how can we build a structure that we can live in, that we can play in, that we can work in, that serves our needs, costs less, and has a lower impact to the environment. And if you base that in science, then you have the data that you need to demonstrate that as you're living and operating that, living in and operating in that space, you're actually delivering on the goal, the project. And so, coming here, I see that for many years, lots of smart people in different spaces with different personas have been very genuine about that effort, and that I find fascinating, and I love that, and I love being part of that.
There is a growing conversation around housing affordability. There's also the challenge of climate resilience.
Yeah.
As a nation, we're facing crisis of housing and homelessness. How do you see that the Passive House principles contribute to long-term solutions, especially in underserved or remote communities, including work with First Nations? At Blue Door, obviously, we have interest in serving our very most vulnerable, and there's lots of our listeners are going to be in the space of homelessness and housing. How does Passive House Canada fit into this? How does it create solutions? Share with us a little more.
Oh gosh, we could talk for hours on this very question, right? I mean, what an important question. So again, in the first few weeks of being here at Passive House Canada, I am really impressed by the focus and the opportunity, let's put it that way, about the opportunity in the social and community housing space in Canada, and connecting the passive house standard or principle to that space. And to elaborate on that, the idea that we can take public funds, for example, and build much needed housing that serves the people who will live in that building much more effectively, whether they are, in some kind of rent to own or, long-term rental situation. The fact that they're not spending as much on heating or cooling that space, the fact that it's a better air quality, better circulation, the fact that the windows are more efficient and more effective, and usually that light is a big consideration too, understanding how light plays in that space, and so it doesn't overheat or get too cold in the winter. So the idea that you're mindfully designing the space so that it serves the people in that space to the highest possible degree. That equation works in any building, but it has huge impact in the social and community housing space. And the notion, again, as I said earlier, this notion of energy poverty, of the cost of actually living in a space. It's hard just to find a space to live in, but once you occupy it, then you need to heat and cool it, and you need to make sure that it's the air quality is good, and that you are living that best life that I talked about, to the best effect. So I think that, in my view, social and community housing across the country is a huge opportunity for this standard. And there are community providers in Ottawa, Hamilton, for example, Toronto, a number of them in Ontario, as well as other provinces, who have set as their standard for construction a standard that looks like passive house. And they recognize too that when you build to this standard, your operating costs overall are going to drop. You can create other pieces into that mix. You can look at the embodied carbon. You can look at the operational carbon. You can think about, how are we generating the energy? Can we put energy back to the grid? Can we make some money there for the building? There's all kinds of options that are compatible, completely compatible with passive house. And at the end of the day, you can create an environment that people can live long-term in, and it will, I think, improve the quality of life that they have and reduce the impact on the pocketbook. That to me is a game changer. I remember when we were at the Homes Group, we did some work with the Assembly of First Nations in different communities, Indigenous communities, and I was stunned at the time to learn, to be taught, that on most reserves, the average lifespan then was 7 years for a home. And part of the problem was that too often the solution was imposed on the community. It wasn't a solution that was developed and created by the community and brought into their space. It was something that was imposed. And passive house design across the country has been adopted by a number of Indigenous communities successfully, because they recognize the value to them in the community, that it can be modified to meet whatever realities they have, depending on what their climate is and their challenges. If they get 3 or 5 feet of snow, for a few months in the winter, you can build and design with that in mind. And again, the idea that it's based in science allows you to factor that in. So it doesn't have to be something that's imposed on the community. It can be, worked as an internal solution, with different designers. And there's lots of options in the space in terms of architects and engineers who appreciate what it means to build in different indigenous communities across the country. So I see it as a huge opportunity for the space, and I'm very excited by that. And the other thing is, as you well know, we are at that space right now in our Canadian history where we've been talking about affordable housing for a long time. And it feels like there's something really interesting happening both at the federal level and also the provincial level, where we're seeing an opportunity for cooperation to happen, where we can build more volume. There's an interest to build more volume. I really hope that we do that, but I hope that we build that volume to a higher standard, because it would be dreadful if we just built more minimum code, which is going to not serve people in 30, 40 years from now.
Passive House Canada offers training for trades and professionals as well, right?
Yes.
Could you walk us through how that works and why it's such an important part of preparing Canada's workforce for the future of green construction?
Yeah, so we offer a number of courses, some master courses. We've got basically two tracks. One is sort of a designer track. The other one's a tradesperson track. The designer would typically be of interest to engineers, architects, consultants, and the tradesperson track is pretty self-explanatory. The idea there is, this typically is for people who have already achieved, some level of understanding of building and construction. So it's not entry level, but they don't know how to build to the Passive House standard, or they don't understand some of the principles or some of the design challenges that they might encounter. And so we have coursework that we've developed here in Canada that helps them understand some of the challenges that have occurred here in Canada and some of the solutions that have been implemented. We've got a great sort of network of independent trainers that deliver that programming. And learners can also decide if they want to take those courses towards an exam and then get certification. And certification is, for some people, the end game, the end goal. And for others, it's just the knowledge. They want the knowledge, but they don't need to take the exam. That's entirely up to them. And then once they've done that, if they want to take some master courses and focus in on very specific areas that might be relevant to specific projects that they're working on, then we also offer that. We don't deliver the exams, but we deliver the courses here in Canada.
And if we look ahead, what would you say your vision is for Passive House Canada over the next 5 years? And what would success look like for you in terms of scaling impact and shifting the industry norms right now?
Yeah. I don't know that my lens goes 5 years out, maybe 2 or 3 years at this point. For me, it's I would be thrilled to see, X number of more passive house buildings, whether they're single family homes or towers being built in Canada. I would love for Passive House to be part of that national conversation about how do we solve the housing crisis that we have, but also solve the building standard challenges that we have to build to a higher standard. And I would love to walk into a supermarket and ask a stranger if they know what Passive House is, and for them to go, yeah, I know what Passive House is. Because a lot of those grocery store conversations I'm having right now is sort of like, I have no idea what Passive House is. What does that mean? Or what is LEED? It goes back to the idea of trying to have a larger conversation with more Canadians about how do we build better buildings. So, this conversation in 2 or 3 years, I would like for people to go, oh yeah, Passive House, that's old school. We know about that. I grew up in one. I went to school in one. I was, when I went to the hospital, to see my, newborn son, that was in a Passive House building. Part of the nomenclature challenge is that it's Passive House. It's, doesn't have to be a house. It can be a hospital. It can be a school, a university. And we have lots of really good examples of that in Canada. right now. And if anyone wants to see one, just go to our website. We've got lots of beautiful pictures.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your journey and insights. We're excited to see how Passive House Canada will continue to lead the way in shaping a more climate resilient and energy efficient future. So for the listeners on the show, if they're sitting there wanting to build affordable or transitional housing, or they have homes that they want to get up to Passive House Canada standards to better support the populations we're serving, could you let us know how people can reach out to you or your team, or learn more, or sign up for certification, or whichever direction this should go?
Yeah, and they should do that. They should, right after this, right after your closing remarks, I mean, they should run to their computer, their other computer, and sign up. The best place to go is passivehousecanada.com. And there are lots of links. They'll get lost in the weeds there on all the interesting things that are going on in Canada. If they want to take courses, they can do that. If they want to understand the standard better, they can do that. And if they want to reach out to me or the other members of the staff, they're more than welcome to do that at any time.
That's amazing. Me and all our listeners are wishing you and Passive House Canada continued success. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Emmy. It was great fun. Appreciate it. And have a great day.
Take care. Well, that's a wrap. You heard from Michael Quast, CEO of Passive House Canada, creating solutions for a sustainable future of housing to cut costs. I know that many of our listeners are interested in bridging the gap from homelessness to housing. Here's one more solution that you can look up more about and hear more about. And until next time, I'm Emmy Kelly, your host at On the Way Home.
You're listening to On the Way Home with your host, Emmy Kelly.